it's a good one. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So the idea is right now I'm like investigating like building backend servers for games, and I'm trying to get a good handle on what the most affordable approach would be to have like game servers, like let's say something that could like validate a server side like a battle royale or shooter or an RPG game, anything of that sort, that requires lots and lots of computation and potentially lots of instances. So it needs to be scalable, and it needs to have load balancing, different regions, probably a relational database off chain as well, um, just so that like because right now like the current approach of a lot of games here on Wax and on a lot of chains is that the game is made specifically for one chain, and then you have NFTs on that one chain, and then you're approaching it with the idea of, well, let's bridge it from this chain to another chain. Whereas I think how it should be, or a more efficient approach would be, you just have everything off chain natively, and then you're just bridging it. You're just like introducing support from your sort of relational database to all these individual chains. I mean, your product would be chain agnostic, and I think that would make a Web3 game way more accessible, way more easier to onboard. So yeah, what are the sort of costs associated with something like that? Regional servers, load balancing, all that.
You said it was heavy computation in the background.
It could be. It could be. I mean, I don't have any benchmarks.
Because depending on what you need, you can get really cheap ARM cloud computers, depending on the bandwidth and everything. If you send a lot of data, I would go bare metal, so you have unlimited data. But then you need to have some kind of scripting with Ansible or something to set up more server if needed. Or go with one of the game rental systems that solve a lot of things that require less personnel to handle it.
You have to go with some kind of cloud release first, so you can right size yourself. You don't want to be purchasing your own metal until you know exactly what you need. You get the benefit of scaling up and scaling down, like using Heightsnell or AWS or Google or whatever. You can figure it out day by day,
There were quite a few things mixed in there. Like you started out with like a first-person shooter, and then stuff like that. Like the backend for a first-person shooter is miles different from anything that's a normal Web3 game, right? So if you focus on the last part, we're having the assets chain agnostic. The reason why stuff is built like this right now is that if all the logic resides in the game contract, you don't actually need servers, and you rely on all the public infrastructure because logic executes on the blockchain, not outside of it. So for most of these things, it's really important to know what kind of game you're actually building to know what kind of backend you were going to need to build. And like the asset management part and having that agnostic, I think, is a whole isolated thing, but there's no way to build a generic backend for any game like that.
I think there has to be a way to build a generic backend, because assets.
Yeah, for the asset part, but not for all games. Like you can't do a shooter like that because the game logic for a shooter is so different. So it's just the asset management part there. And then you still decide to take the logic away from the game contracts where it is now and move it to your backend, and then have a way to integrate with those blockchains. So you're just adding more complexity. If your goal from the start is to be multi-chain, sure. Otherwise, you're just introducing a lot more complexity and stuff there that's not needed. So it really depends on what you try to do.
So the thing is, for a very long time, I've been very focused on building purely on-chain technology. And the thing is, like, it works just fine. The problem is, you want anyone to access your technology, they need to already be on the chain. It's extraordinarily difficult to do the whole onboarding thing when people can't even create an account. You can't push transactions. Maybe they don't have crypto. Maybe they don't even know what crypto is, right? this is a massive barrier. And so whatever difficulties there might be in essentially like replicating smart contract logic just within a like a server off chain, I mean, I'd say it's a justified expense and barrier to go through because it completely simplifies the user experience on the receiving end. It becomes as simple as literally just like creating an account with an email, and then there you go, you're playing. Right? You don't have to worry about staking. You don't have to worry about like any resources, and it just works. And then the moment you want to trade your digital assets for crypto, well, that's when you would have essentially like NFT bridging or token bridging or wrapping.
Then it's basically a website, web service.
Can you elaborate on that?
What it sounds like you're explaining is moving the user accounts and user interactions and things like that off chain so they can more easily interact with the game. It sounds like a web server more than a big game, like a web service.
Well, that would have to be attached to it, and then like because there are definitely a lot of different types of games that require specific approaches. For example, like how like just like in regards to like how like the server side data would be held. Just going off the top of my head, like for the things that I'm more keen on building, they would all require like instances of like let's say a game, you get a round going. I'm not entirely sure how you would have something like Minecraft available. I guess on like a big world. I guess you could probably have it in the same approach.
Michael runs a few Minecraft servers.
Yeah, that's all I was say. I got some Minecraft. They're actually a little bitty when it comes down to it.
I run some Ark servers in the past. I think I have some still.
But I'll be honest with you, that being said, back to the whole scaling and is it worth it? Yes, I have racks and racks of high-end super fast servers that are at my disposal. Yet I pay $30 a month to throw the production instance of Minecraft that the players play on a Minecraft host and scale it as needed. And our car app, it runs on AWS. I mean, because it's not worth it for me to fight the infrastructure battle when it's so easy just to throw it out there and scale it. And yes, I agree with you. Is that on chain is hard. I'm a big Web 2 and sprinkle in Web 3 where needed, which minimizes your dependency on having to interact with the blockchain, and you're dealing with normal technology, cloud DBs, VPSs, stuff like that.
Personally, I'm not afraid of the technology. I think it's mostly like the untapped market is though. It's just too much of a barrier, too much of a hurdle. At least until it becomes a bit more mainstream. Because yeah, like if we had maybe 10% of the world actively using like Web3 technology and stuff, it'd be a totally different case, But we're just not really there yet. Like I'd say, like most people, when I've shown them just like wax and stuff, they see like we're using a wax fellow, they see the pop-ups coming up and they're like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, it's like MetaMask, but it's just we just have like our own kind of thing here on wax. And then they look at me dead in the eye and they're like, what's MetaMask? And so like you can't there's nothing you can say there, they're like, well, why does that have to keep popping up? It's pretty distracting, this is like, what kind of game is this? And it's a good point, right? Not to mention all the setup that's required. So yeah, the tech works, but it's a people problem, right? So we gotta make the tech just literally we gotta take a couple steps back and just do what is practically invisible for the users, and then for those who want to opt in and do the crypto trading. Because once you got, like, let's say you play a game that's fully off chain. Like let's say you're playing Fortnite or like I don't know, Call of Duty on chain. You play the game a little bit, you get some skins. You know, you can do the same drop mechanism as CS:GO, or I guess CS2, where everyone gets like a free crate or two. They get a crate NFT worth like 10 cents. Sometimes it's like worth $1. You want to open it, you pay like $2.50. That works. That does wonders for CS2. They make millions and millions over there, and it's relatively free to play, and you can make money while playing. So once you have some digital assets, well, now you have an incentive to figure out, well, how do I get some money out of this? Right now, there's actually a carrot for people to pursue on their own time, as opposed to right now it feels like they're just getting the stick when they gotta figure out how to get some, crypto to set up a wallet and actually play a game. Not to mention, well, how limited the games are. We have when it's just on chain, you can't have on chain Call of Duty. We're just not there yet. We need Antelope iteration 12 with 30 blocks per second or something.
Yeah, but you can also set up your own private blockchain on a few machines. It's very cheap to run at the start, an Antelope chain. It's expensive when it gets big like Wax, but a small, a new one is very cheap to run and easy to run. You can have it on free nodes or something. That can be across the different regions that you want to have them, and then each user can have an account created there, which has some name that you also have. Make sure that they can have or related to an account on Wax in the future. And you can deploy the atomic assets contract in your contract, and you can run everything in the background in your game, and you don't even need to have all the resources on Wax. If you have the knowledge, then you can get away pretty cheap, and it's really not that. If you know how Antelope works, it's not that hard to run a small chain. There's a bunch of us that know how to spin up a chain and do that.
Sure, but the problem isn't Wax. It's not necessarily that Wax is problematic. The problem is just Web3 as a whole is a massive barrier to just letting people play the video game.
It doesn't have to be.
You can circumvent that if you have like your own blockchain, and
Yeah.
let's say you buy a top level domain on Wax, so you know every account you create on your sub chain, so on your private chain, can later be associated with an account on Wax. Then you run the sub chain and create accounts on behalf of their users, and the users don't have to have the keys. They only have to have this account association that you can do in your backend. And then if a user actually wants to get out and wants to self-custody, then you can bridge him over to Wax, and everything he has done on your private chain can report it to your chain on Wax. And this way you take away the entire hurdle of integrating into Web3 while still being Web3 and having everything at your disposal.
So that's what I meant. So you can create the account in your background, and the user just logs in with his email or whatever, and he gets his username, and then he goes to play. He doesn't have to interact with the chain at all. You just verify things in your backend, and you have this account specified, so that account on your private chain gets the assets and everything created. And then if he wants to migrate it, then you validate everything, and then you mint them on the real blockchain or whatever. And you can do everything, and they don't ever have to interact with anything. And running one of these small chains is very it's cost effective compared to anything else.
You don't even need that extra chain that can just be in your backend, right?
Yeah, if he wants to
yeah.
use his game logic and everything is only what I meant.
Technically, it can even be inside the contracts. So
Yeah.
one of the solutions we have for Forge Arena is that we just have everything tracked in smart contracts and use our own backend keys to push the transactions. And we associate that with a Cloud Wallet account, because the Cloud Wallet account can exist without having an on-chain account. And then only when the user creates his on-chain account in the Cloud Wallet, then the stuff can be migrated from our own contracts into his own wallet. So that way you can also build a Web2 experience even inside and outside of Wax without going through transaction signing and everything, if you have this backend infrastructure. And if you don't have the backend infrastructure, you can still do it with like what we did with the C# plugin in Unity in the mobile application of Cogs, where we just created accounts and associated them with the Cloud Wallet. So there's a lot of solutions you can do to avoid all the Web3 stuff and make a seamless experience without the user ever interacting really with the blockchain.
Then you can
Okay.
move all this account creation, and if there's any cost for the user to create it or whatever, that can be further down the line.
Out of curiosity, what is the fastest theoretical block time one can achieve with that software if it was just centrally hosted in the same location, so low latency or whatever?
Did I miss something? I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, the lowest theoretical block time you would be able to achieve with such a clean and fresh sidechain.
Blocks are still 0.5 seconds.
I was about to say, there's a minimum transaction amount. There's a maximum that's in a block. So that's where that 4,000 TPS calculation comes from. Your own private chain, you can tweak it. We've done that. Bump the block time up to 400, drop the minimum down to like 10 micro milliseconds, whatever the hell it was. So I mean,
that answers my question.
You can squeeze more into it. Careful, there are some ramifications from trying to squeeze more blood from that turnip.
You can also change from having 21 BPs to less, and the lib is lower. That's what Ultra does.
Depending on your rate,
right now we got
have a
two,
different.
yeah.
You could even have a different finalization strategy, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
Right now it's 2 blocks per second. So like, what's the lowest or what's the highest you can go to? Can we get 10?
Well,
5?
number one, you have half a second would be the maximum the way it's coded, but there's also a theoretical limit that's in place. That's the max block size is 200 milliseconds. So for every half a second, you actually would you squeeze in 200 milliseconds for the processing power currently. You could bump that up to, in theory, probably not 500, but we've done 450.
Or bump that down if you want more blocks, but I don't know why you would want more blocks. I don't see the benefit.
Using the half second block time at least helps keep the math from going too awry. But there's physical limits of time. And remember, 100 milliseconds is 3 times what it takes for me to talk to a server in Europe or wherever, and 10 times to talk to Australia. So those add up, but those are the 2 numbers that you can definitely squeeze more blood from the blocks if you're on your own private chain. If maybe you aren't doing it around the world, you can make your minimum transactions smaller and do small transactions if you can, and then you can squeeze them more time into each half second block to be used, and then you can also go super crazy.
Going into Anders' question, why would you want a faster block time? Like, let's say a block, when a block is finished, I'm done with my calculations of some physics models or whatever it is, or collisions between players or something like that. So if I had 2 blocks per second, that would mean I have like 2 FPS in my game, right? So a faster block time would mean like a higher tick rate on the server side, which would enable just other games. Like that's unrealistic, but for a first-person shooter, you would want a much higher tick rate than for a idle game, which doesn't require any tick rate.
You
right?
don't have to write everything to the chain at all times.
It is unorthodox, but I mean, hey, someone can do it.
Sounds like a lot of writes, but yeah.
I mean, in my
biblical, yeah.
My opinion is if you need that level of a clock cycle blockchain, it's not the best at everything. It's a really expensive database. I mean,
yeah, compared to SQLite.
Right.
Do you remember?
When you really need it, I mean, synchronize it to the chain, but does it really have to run real time on the chain?
The closest thing to real time I've seen, US Authority built Space Invaders. Like it actually Space Invaders using the chain. It was basically an action go left, an action go right, an action fire. That was on the EOS mainnet. And then on Telos, there was a mob that created a robot with a camera, and you had to navigate through like an obstacle course. And if you got the robot up onto the pad, you win. It was kind of like Logo. You told it by the blockchain, go forward 30 centimeters, turn right 90 degrees. That was also on the blockchain.
And that's
But,
cool and all. Not sure how useful, but
we're talking about real time stuff. I'm just saying
I get it.
it's the most real time
I will say I saw an FPS and built on Antelope, older actually. It was the EOSIO at the time, but they had their own sidechain that they spun up. But it was an FPS, and it literally recorded shots and kills, frags, whatever, on chain real time. And I also saw kind of a little, I don't remember what the theme of it was, but a piddly game kind of over on ProTime that was pretty effectively peppering within the half a second block. I also say when you have a 2-minute irreversibility, FPS in that level of data or anything real time like that just makes my head cringe. But you could do it. You just need to build your solution for the UX. The tech will not help you make it better. You have to build to obscure it.
And recording all that stuff is fine. It's not. It's trivial, but actually having the logic in there is not. And I doubt that they would do that for a shooter because you won't be able to do a smooth experience.
I think you definitely can. I think.
Have you designed a shooter?
Metal worked with that. They had a pretty real time here on Wax. I mean, God,
that's true.
Because he would come in and he would get really mad at us because things didn't keep up with his half a second real time block time or whatever. But
yeah, but that's a strategy game, right? That's worlds apart from a shooter.
I mean, it was multiple people on a map that where that lag matters. But
it's
anyway,
like
the point is,
different skill, really.
They've done it. They've pushed the boundaries, but yeah, you're nowhere near. In my opinion, if you want to do that in the next 2 years, you should do it with your own off-chain DB and sync whatever you need as quickly as you need to the chain and obscure that because.
Yeah, it's going to be like literally a hose of just garbage data. Like the amount of state delta that'd be coming out of it, every single bullet that's coming out of your gun, creating an object, moving, you know,
And it will still feel horrible to play.
I think it could still. I think it can be done nicely.
No, but they even struggle with like FPS games for a lot of games already, where you shoot at one place, but the player is actually a little bit forward or behind that, and that's a horrible experience for a gamer. And that's using the most effective ways you can. So I don't think it's possible to do it in any decent way. At least not in a decentralized blockchain. A centralized, sure, you can probably optimize it to happen.
You don't need. You can essentially treat it like forks, where you only validate what happens on the blockchain. So you do it on the back end, and then you validate it on the blockchain, or just put the validation on the blockchain.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think we should
just to be clear, I'm not advocating for this. This is more like a thought experiment as to like, well, can we have on-chain Call of Duty?
I thought you were building it this week. That's what it sounded like to me.
But you can talk to Corvin about things like this. He has thought a lot about putting full game logic on chain and everything.
Yeah.
Well, and overcoming the battle of lag, so to say. Like he could get it on chain, using it on chain. Like he had to rewrite diffuse firehose just to try to streamline it. It's one thing to get it into the chain, but then to turn back around and use it in a client. You know, I mean, it just takes time.
Yeah, and even that game, it was sensitive way lower to latency than even Metal War. So trust me when I say it's impossible to do this for a first-person
Well,
shooter.
with the current technology, I think it is limiting to the point of the UX can't overcome it, or you have to overcome it with the UX. The technology is nowhere near that. I mean, we used to have phone lines for internet and stuff too. I mean, things progress. We now watch internet or the TV open.
Okay, I got two more questions. So, would there be a way to have, because like one of the bigger barriers I see right now is that, well, none of the wallets are designed for this. What wallet is designed to push out 30 transactions a second, right? With like your movement, your position, and whatnot. So, is it possible to have like a WebSocket between the client and just directly to a ship node for pushing transactions and reading
Not a ship node.
that back?
You could use a WebSocket. I probably wouldn't use ship because it's serialized, but yeah, there's lots of games. I mean, that's what they were doing.
You can use Cleos. For pushing transactions, you want the leanest client possible. So you just need to pack the transaction and push it. You don't really need a wallet for it.
What's the most efficient way? Cleos?
It's a C++, so I would assume.
But yes, WebSockets. I mean, and normally you'll see a lot of blockchain, boom, WebSocket connected, and that's wise. It's getting notified versus.
But Cleos is not optimized enough. It does a few get calls before pushing to validate keys and things, and you would remove that for this occasion. You would validate that before and then use it in a game client. You wouldn't validate the keys for everything. You just push it.
Remember what we used to do with Scatter? We used to just say, approve all transactions to this contract from this wallet.
Wax Wallet has that too.
It does.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
Been asking for so on Scatter you could actually say whitelist this transaction for this contract,
Yeah.
and I have been asking for this for both Anchor and Cloud Wallet for ages.
Mine auto approves certain transactions that I put in my list. Like I don't get prompted for a lot of my Alcor things because it just auto approves and submits it. I mean, that's what you're talking about, right? No interaction. But I mean, I still have to wait. The browser has to sit there and grind and wait on the API to respond and say, yep, I got that transaction, or nope, it failed, deadline exceeded. Not on Wax. Got that on another chain recently, but it's the UX.
And if you need it for a game, it's light clients that that you can push API calls to, and you can get responses from them.
Saying, look, as your block producer, one of your few people actually even validating the blocks and running those transactions, I suggest you do as little as in the Web3 layer as possible. Build Web2 and sprinkle in the Web3 features where they work. Take your assets out. Go down that battle once you need to. Run your own account structure. Run your own DB. Run your own WebSockets. And then integrate these features where needed instead of building everything.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you, but it is interesting. I find when you push a system to its absolute limits, all the small little variables that you look over, those are the things that start catching up. Those are the things that you get caught on. And
right, but there is a limit to the round peg and a square hole. I mean, hey, guess what? I can write HTML web pages, but there is a limit to what that technology can provide me within my scope. I mean, there are other technologies like Anders and his CSS that are designed to do things differently or better. So yes, you can shave that square peg down a little bit, but you do need to stop and truly consider there are other ways of doing it, maybe.
For sure. But hey, man, maybe 10, 20 years down the line, maybe that's all we've got. We only have on-chain gaming, pure on-chain. The other question I had was, so let's assume we can get the transactions to the chain and somehow read them back as well in a timely manner. How exactly could you go about load balancing and having regional like servers or like regional validators for different sets of data? It becomes kind of like a weird concept, because normally with the chain we don't care. We don't care if like where in the world this data was sent and where you're reading it from, because it doesn't really matter.
No, we do.
We do care?
Yeah, a lot of UIs or wallets, they check the response time to the API nodes that you use to push and request data from.
Yes. So that is true. But it's still not like, well, to what extent would just the API nodes that you're selecting and reading from, like could that be the difference between having like 100 millisecond latency in this hypothetical, 30 blocks per second chain?
Yeah,
yes,
of course.
I'll say this. I mean, the path, what comes to mind is that like Ross and I have fought this battle just because we're on the opposite sides of the earth and our names always line up close to each other. But and other BPs as well, when we talk about peering is important, and especially even for the APIs, because while it is pretty obscured from you, there is a peer-to-peer network that takes a transaction from over here, like a virus, percolates it throughout the network the best that it can, and it has to end up over here on the validator node. So, as you've seen, if you don't have good peers or something goes wonky between all the stars aligning, we call them kind of empty blocks, because you can't get that, what I call the mempool. I think it's technically the unapplied transaction queue. But yes, if you're shoving transactions into an API that is dramatically latent to the validators, and especially if you start truncating the block time and even not allow, I mean, they'll time out and expire if they don't run sometimes. But does that make sense? Where you're right. I mean, Antelope technology is very effective at P2P scattering.
But not only that, all the guilds put in a lot of time and effort to work on the reducing latency between the producers and the peering. So the client have the latency to the APIs, and then the transaction need to move further, and that's the latency between the peers that Michael are talking about. So you have both of those things that matters, and the guilds or the block producers put in a lot of time together to optimize the networking between different nodes and make sure that this data actually moves as efficient as possible. Most guilds put in a lot of time there.
Gotcha. Is there, this comes a little, it comes a bit weird to like view the chain in this sort of way, but is it possible to have like almost like lazy loading on the chain, or like just like something like regionally it's like dragging along the state, like it's like almost like the chain is naturally forking constantly, but then it catches up to like the actual, like once they're able to validate the data everywhere else. Because it's like if you're on the west coast of Canada, compared to someone that might be in Australia, you have like considerable ping difference. The people in the west coast, they need to know what's happening in the games in Australia and vice versa. You know what I mean? And so could the chain kind of be growing and having these, like, I guess, tables being populated? They're just in different regions, and then it catches up later on the data from that's on the other side of the world.
You would need a separate chain for that. The blockchain, it's supposed to be validated, everything that is done on the chain by all the BPs. That's right. Like the purpose of it.
Token transfers.
You can't really choose what to validate where. You have to have different chains for that. Then
is state. right now. Now, that is some of the discussions we've been having, but yeah, I mean, either you have a current validated state, which is everything, welcome to your big chunk of RAM, or you don't have a valid state.
Could there be something like a roll up, where it's like you just assume that all the states are valid?
Yeah, but you're talking about side chains now.
Yeah, well, of course, there would no. What chain would be dedicated to running Call of Duty?
That would do it. I will say this. I think where you're kind of going with it is maybe what some of the ARB bots have started doing is reading the mempool, right? I mean, and that's, we don't have a mempool. We have peer-to-peer and we have pending unapplied transactions. So you don't look at it at, I mean, my get tables dramatically dropped and my peer-to-peer connections have shot through the roof because they stopped querying the table state and they literally took a step ahead and said, all right, give me the peer-to-peer block. That's what's coming. And if you assume that's valid, assume that'll make state, then you can try to get as good of a head start off of it.
Okay. Got lots to think about.
Right. I don't.
But it's good. A lot of these questions are things that the guilds have been working on for a long time that might not be understood openly or shared openly in a good way. It's complex networking.
That's kind of what happens when things work, though. Okay, you know, no one's talking about gravity and saying like, well, what's up with that, right? It's just like, well, it's such a deeply rooted thing that you just don't even see it anymore, right?
Yeah, the guilds do nothing. They don't have to do any work. They just rent the server, forget about it, and earn money. Or
well, you guys,
there's a lot of work done there.
Millions of that.
Yeah. No, but there's a lot of work in the background that then discussions to understand, optimize, work on these things that are very hard to share so the community actually knows that it's happening or understands it. Because how interesting is it to listen on all the networking optimizations? Hey, we have shared videos, we have articles, there are discussions, recordings of it, but it's like hearing about it, unless you understand and start to discover a problem you want to solve, it's very hard to pay attention to it. There are more fun things to care about. Which colorful image that will be more fun to get.
Anders tent? Is there a story behind that?
Understand. Maybe. I don't know.
He lives in a cabin. He doesn't live in a tent.
I have a wooden house.
That he built by hand. I've seen pictures.
Really?
Sweden. I've heard all houses have wooden there.
Basically.
Yeah.
And they are built on rocks. And they stand for hundreds of years. It's crazy.
You guys got your own real life Minecraft server over there.
Yeah, you should see some of the, like, we have a massive barn where I live and it's all built on rocks. The foundation are big rocks where there are some beams on it. Just gravel and rocks. Pretty cool.
Cool. Is that us for tonight?
But I'm glad you're here, Ross, even though I know it's like an hour later.
Yeah, it's just going into tomorrow.
Just a side note, we keep pushing that we are trying to reshape the public infrastructure landscape. I just want to throw that in the room. No need to discuss it today, but at some point we need to come to a resolution for that.
You want to throw something else in the room?
Yeah, maybe it's time to conclude today's call. If you guys don't raise any more topics, or if there's nothing urgent to discuss, we can call it for today. Last chance.
The few guys running Talos in here, there's a new version just pushed. That probably is a patch to work around the ship problem. I've been running it for a week and it seems to work, but who knows?
Do they have the same ship issues like we do?
The Talos, the ship reader, has
Also,
a
Talos.
Sorry, I
yeah.
was,
Telos.
thinking of
Not
the-
Telos, yeah.
yeah.
So we have a workaround on the
Swedish
client side that might work. It seems to work, but who knows?
I'll say I haven't been killing my state histories with connection problems like I used to with 5 as much as maybe 4. But
Try requesting some old data or some data that you don't have, and it's very fun.
yeah, I mean, I just went through and I built all new Hyperion servers and re-indexed entire chains, and I mean, ripping the snot out of some of these servers, and I was actually impressed that I didn't break state history much. So
we have been killing turtle while we're doing that.
Maybe you should try it with Bash.
Yeah. Turtle MQ. Fucking bullshit.
All right, I'm out, guys. Great meeting.
See ya.
There you guys.
To you.
See you.
Thank you,
Cheers.
guys.
Yeah, let's conclude for today. Happy Tuesday.